This is the third installment, walking through measurement methods for mechanistic force-based spinal manipulation research. And in this segment, we're going to walk through some of the complexities that are at play when we think about spine, when we think about the integration of biomechanics with neuroscience, and when we think about how engineers think about all of this. And in fact, engineering perspectives overlay on mechanisms in very concrete ways. Nothing is haphazard. Nothing just happens. It's all data-driven and relies on experimentation and analysis, whether that's bench work, whether that's human subjects work, whether that's computational work, but it's really using a systematic approach and not just conjecture or theory. There's also important considerations as we think about spatial scales. So if we return to neurocircuitry of force-based manipulations, we have to think about things across scales, both from the full body, whole body perspective, to the organs and ligaments, to tissues and cells, to all the way down to molecules and even to genes. So there are considerations, especially at the interfaces between these scales. And this is where things become both exciting, but also very complex. Similarly, there is consideration and complication as we think about simply a pain mechanism from the local surroundings in the periphery all the way to the brain where pain is perceived. And this is just a snapshot of the complexities in space, in the periphery to the CNS, but also across a number of different tissue and physiologic systems. So you could imagine structural and material changes, material response changes. You could imagine inflammation and cascades of the immune system being invoked if there is a stimulus or pain. The electrophysiologic signaling that is required to transmit these messages, and then the central regulation of this, which involves both neuroregulation, neuroimmune, and inflammation mechanisms, as well as analgesic mediator systems. And then this is all ignoring that which occurs in the brain, which is super important for the actual perception of pain. So here you can imagine there's a lot of complexity at the interfaces between the physiologic phenomena, whether that's biological, chemical, mechanical, electrical, or magnetic. So if we take an example of just jerking your neck, for example, because you have pain when you turn it, you can imagine and walk through a number of different systems and approaches to considering that simple motion of a neck jerk when you have this pain. You already heard in the second section when Victor Barocas talked through some of the kinematics and the kinetics of biomechanics. So you have the neck and the vertebral motion. You have muscle activation and contraction, which applies forces. We have neural processing, which both intentionally causes movement, but at the same time can also have reflex results. I've mentioned pain perception, which is far more complicated than we can talk about here. There's mechanical loading to the nerves. There's a host of other tissues which are both impacted and impactful, including the ligaments, the fascia, bones, and spinal and brain circuits, which are both dynamic and constantly remodeling. And we haven't talked at all, but it is important to consider the psychosocial factors which impact all of this, both processing and mechanisms of movement and mechanics. And so as we close this section, Spinework is really interested in helping to bring down barriers at these interfaces to better understand and put people together and research groups and methods together to better define and study these mechanisms through which force-based manipulations can reduce spinal pain. Do not hesitate to reach out to our network. Please consider resourcing us and checking in on the website for relevant papers, educational videos, and other educational resources, as well as potential funding opportunities. And thank you for your attention.